Da 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 da, and we're back. So we just finished chapter 6, and you heard that Jack and Annie were on the boat crossing the Delaware with George Washington, and he was not very happy about it. So we're going to start on chapter 7 now and go to 7 and 8. So chapter 7 is called Spies. "What are you doing here?" George Washington asked. The commander-in-chief sounded furious. "We made a mistake," Jack said. We didn't mean to come." George Washington turned to the rowers. "Who let these children sneak aboard?" he said in a stern voice. The men looked at Jack and Annie with surprise. "It's not their fault," Annie said quickly. "They're working too hard to notice us." Just then the boat banged against the ice. The ice cracked. The boat moved on, then bumped against shore. 2 soldiers jumped out and pulled the boat up on shore. George Washington looked at Jack and Annie. "This boat is returning to get more men," he said. "When it does, you two will get out and stay on the other shore." "Yes, sir," said Jack. He felt very embarrassed. George Washington then gave the orders to the rowers. "Make sure these children do not board any other boats when you return," he said. The general stepped onto the riverbank. The wind started to pick up. The snow fell harder. As the crew unloaded the boat, neither Jack or Annie spoke. Jack was miserable. They had caused trouble for George Washington just when the general was trying to make America an independent nation. Jack desperately wished he and Annie had gone home earlier. They watched more and more boats land on the riverbank. As the soldiers unloaded their weapons and horses, a freezing rain began. Now rain, snow, and sleet fell together. Jack heard General George Washington call to one of his men. "The storm is getting worse, Major," the general said. "Yes, sir," the major said. "I think we're in for a blizzard," said Washington. "Yes, sir. Our mission may be hopeless, sir," said the major. "Should we call it off?" "No, you shouldn't," Jack whispered. "You're going to win." "Should we turn back, sir?" the major said. "No, no," said Annie. She stood up. The boat rocked. "Don't turn back, George Washington, sir," she shouted. "You have to march on, sir. You have to attack the Hessians, sir." "Shh!" Jack tried to pull Annie back down. "We're not supposed to know about their secret mission." "How does she know our plans, Major?" George Washington asked. "Listen to us, sir," said Annie. "You're going to win." She pulled away from Jack and jumped out of the boat. "Annie!" Jack leapt onto the riverbank. He scrambled after Annie up the steep, icy slope. "You have to lead your men, General George Washington, sir," Annie said. "The Hessians will be surprised. They think no army will be marching on a night like this." "How do you know all of this?" the major shouted above the storm. "How do you know what the Hessians are doing and thinking?" For once, Annie seemed at a loss for words. "She just guessed," said Jack. Just then, the bearded soldier who had yelled at Jack earlier stepped forward. "I saw this boy earlier," he said. "He was writing things down." No, I was just..." Now Jack was at a loss for words. "Seize them," the major shouted. "They're spies." Uh-oh. Chapter 8. These are the times. Jack grabbed Annie's hand. "We're not spies," he said. He whirled around to face George Washington. "General Washington, remember those words you said to your men?" Jack said, "You should believe them yourself, sir." "What are you talking about?" General George Washington asked. Jack yanked the captain's letter from his bag. By the light of the lamp, he read the words the captain had copied to his children. "These are the times that try men's souls," Jack read. "But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph." Jack looked at George Washington. "Even if things look impossible, you should keep going, sir," he said. "The harder things seem, the greater the triumph, right? That's what you read to your men. You have to keep going for their sake." "Yes, and you have to keep going for our sake," said Annie. "For the sake of the future children of America, sir." As the wet snow hissed around them, George Washington stared a long moment at Jack and Annie. Finally, he put a hand on each one of their shoulders. "I do not know who you are," he said. "I do not know how you know what you know, but I believe you. For your sake and for the future children of America, we will march on." "Yay!" cried Annie. "Yay," said Jack softly. He sighed with relief and put away the captain's letter. "Now, get back in the boat," said George Washington. "You must leave the fighting to us, to me and my men." Jack felt very grateful to George Washington and his whole army. They were risking their lives for all of America's children, past and future. He could barely speak. "Thank you, sir," said Annie. "Thank you both for telling me to listen to my own advice," said George Washington. He called to the rowers waiting in the boat. "Take good care of these two." George Washington climbed onto his horse. He looked down at Jack and Annie. "Merry Christmas," he said. The commander-in-chief rode away into the stormy darkness. Let's read another one. Why not, right? Chapter 9. Flash! "All aboard," one of the rowers called. Jack and Annie hurried down the steep riverbank. They climbed back into the boat. The crew pushed away from the shore. The boat started back through the icy, churning waters of the Delaware River. Jack was freezing in the sleet and snow, but he didn't worry about it now. He was thinking instead about how they helped George Washington. He was thinking about how they helped keep history on course. Jack felt great. When they got to the riverbank, Jack and Annie jumped out of the boat. "Thanks," Jack yelled to the rowers. With the wind on their backs, Jack and Annie took off through the blizzard. They ran down the icy bank of the Delaware River. Thunder rumbled in the snowy sky. Lightning zigzagged over the woods. "How will we find the tree house?" cried Annie. "I don't know," said Jack, "but don't worry, we will find it." He felt very confident now. After meeting George Washington, after being thanked by George Washington, he and Annie ran on through the rain and the snow and the sleet. They ran along the riverbank until a bright flash of lightning lit up the sky. Then Jack saw it. The tree house was directly to their left, high in a tall tree covered with snow. Oh, and my... It logged me out. Okay, here we go. "Over there," he shouted. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh, crud. There we go, I got it. Things happen, right? Nope, next one. "Covered in snow. Over there," he shouted. Jack and Annie ran toward the edge of the woods. In the dark, Jack looked up, searching for the tree house. Lightning lit up the woods again. Jack saw the rope ladder flapping wildly in the wind. He grabbed it. "Annie," he called. "Here," she said. "Let's go," he said. They climbed up the swaying ladder and then scrambled into the treehouse. They were soaking wet, covered with snow and slush. Annie grabbed the Pennsylvania book. "I wish we could go there," she shouted. The wind blew even harder. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 10. This peaceful place. Gray early light spilled into the treehouse. Birds sounded in the woods. The summer wind felt warm and gentle. Jack and Annie were wearing their nice dry clothes again. "Oh man," said Jack, "it's good to be home." "Yeah," said Annie, sighing, "back in this peaceful place." Jack pulled the captain's letter out of his pack. He turned it over. It was addressed to Molly and Ben Sanders, Apple Tree Farm, Frog Creek, Pennsylvania. "Molly and Ben lived on a farm near these woods over 200 years ago," said Jack. Annie gently touched the letter. "Your dad is going to make it home, kids. He misses you," Annie whispered, as if she could send comforting words back through time. Jack carefully placed the special writing from the Revolutionary War next to the writing of the Civil War. "Look," said Annie. She picked up a note lying in the corner. It said simply, "Come back on Tuesday." "Another message from Morgan," said Annie. Jack smiled. He pulled on his pack. "See you Tuesday, Treehouse," he said. He started down the rope ladder and Annie followed. In the early daylight, they ran through the Frog Creek woods. Then they ran down their street. They climbed onto their porch and they rested against the railing. They looked out at the dawn sky. Jack remembered the whoosh of the cold wind on the Delaware. He remembered the hiss of the wet snow and the slosh of the icy waves. He remembered George Washington reading to his men, "The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph." Jack whispered. "Those words are true," said Annie. "It was a hard conflict, and I feel kind of glorious now. Don't you?" Jack laughed. "Yeah, definitely," he said. Then he and Annie slipped into their quiet, peaceful house. So, that is the end of the American Revolution Magic Treehouse book. I will actually start reading a different book next week, so I hope y'all love this one, and I will see y'all next week. Bye, y'all.